But this interests me. OJ Simpson died from cancer. Good. Sad, but good. Not sad because he died from cancer or that he had kids who are mourning the loss of their dad. I understand that. But a guy who would not give the peace needed to the families of the two victims whose lives I think most of us believe he ended. And if you want to say he didn't end their lives, if he didn't, he damn sure knows who did. So, good. And you get people who are like, I'll pull up my X account where the Heisman Trophy Trust mourns the passing of the 1968 Heisman Trophy winner OJ Simpson. We extend sympathy to his family. That's fine, but I said, what's to mourn? Nothing to mourn. And some dude named Saran Battle, who does NBC Sports in Boston and 98.5 The Sports Hub. He actually has 4.8 thousand followers. This was actually his tweet to me. Why not? What did he do that makes him not worthy of being mourned? Like, really? And I guess, look, here's the issue. And documentaries, like the power of the OJ documentary on ESPN, the power of the Jordan documentary on ESPN, in many times kind of sets the record straight of what really happened. But to those of us who lived it, we understand that that trial was about way more than a double murder. It was. It was about, it's kind of a reckoning for police coming off of, among other things, what happened with Rodney King. And I'm going to be, I have been the person who, at times, there are others in this industry who they'll tell me off air or like, man, you crushed that dude. I wanted to, but I couldn't because, well, you know how the industry works. You know, even if you're right, people don't like being called out. There is a show, I believe it's a podcast, right, that has had OJ on several times. You are among the worst human beings to ever call yourselves media. You are not worthy of even, I'm not even, do we know, I know the do you know the podcast name?
I've been searching for it.
Yeah. I'd prefer not to name the podcast because the whole idea of having him on is to bring attention to your podcast. If you need to bring OJ Simpson on to bring attention to your podcast, it's just not worthy of it. It's just not. So we didn't talk about I've never talked about his tweets, his commentary. I think the whole thing is disgusting. Murdered people in cold blood. And yeah, he was a great football player, man. There's just no denying it. You know, 2,000 yards in 14 games. But he murdered two people, including his ex-wife, in cold blood. And then he was going to write a book, or had a book, If I Did It. Oh, yeah, and he was supposed to spend the rest of his living days trying to find those murderers. Unless they were on golf courses throughout the country or in sports bars recently, he didn't come up with anything. What were you going to say, Jay Stu?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, look, the OJ chase and the OJ trial are seminal moments in our lives. Right? Like, here's how you can pick apart, like, how old you are. Where were you when Kennedy was shot? If you're, in your 60s or 70s, you have a story about the day that our president was murdered. If you're our age, Jay Stu and my age, okay, you remember the OJ trial. You probably remember the Challenger blowing up, right? I was in fourth grade in Miss Sally's class, And Miss Sally's class, they wheeled in remember you used to have the big old TV, but it was on I don't even know what you would call it. It would wheel in and it had like trays underneath it. And then it had some sort of like almost belt to keep it in place. And she had gotten the times screwed up. And the reason that everybody, this is the perfect example. Sam Kinsley. Okay?
Hey, you got my last name right.
You are how old?
37.
Okay. So do you know why we all watch The Challenger?
Like the launch of it?
Yes.
There was, believe the astronauts there was a woman, the astronauts were more diverse they'd ever been.
They had a teacher on board.
Teacher, right. Yeah.
So it was celebrated.
Like a civilian going into outer space.
Celebrate. It wasn't just a civilian. It was a teacher, right? And so they had been planned on everybody watches this in your classroom, and then she was going to do like talkbacks from space, like lessons from space sort of thing. It was a huge thing. And so they wheel in this big deal, and we didn't actually see it. Everybody else did, and they came on the loudspeaker and said, "Teachers, if you would, please turn off your televisions and have your kids have recess outside," right? And then all the teachers that saw it were totally broken up. You saw 9 astronauts die. In the seminal moments in my lifetime, Challenger blowing up, OJ Chase, OJ trial, 9/11, watching the tower. I was watching the TV when the towers came down. The Persian Gulf War preceded that, which, again, Sam, you're a little young on this side. That must have been 1990, I think it was. I think it was spring of 1990. And that was the first like live broadcast war on TV, and it would look like all lasers in the middle of the night, right? Where Iraq had attacked Kuwait, and then we went in there to liberate Kuwait, and we see all this gunfight and fires and bombs in the middle of the night, right? It was on CNN, and everybody watched it. What else am I missing, Ilo, in terms of the seminal moments of our lifetime? You're, I think, a little bit older than me. So
I'm not a little bit older than you. You're a little bit older than me.
Am I?
Not that I'm touchy about that.
Okay.
Anyway, well, you bring up the Challenger. I literally remember the spot I was at. My grandfather was giving me a ride to school, and I remember hearing it on the radio, and I remember the name of the astronaut. It was Krista McAuliffe. I remember that to this day. I remember when I first heard the news about the murders where I was walking into my parents' bedroom and I heard it on the radio. I remember where I was when I heard the verdict announced. I was in school. I remember the time. It was 10:06 in the morning. And in our high school, all the classes had the announcement of the verdict live on TV. It was that big. And remember, the Bronco chase was simultaneous with Game 5 of the NBA Finals. Yes.
NBA Finals, yeah. Yep. Jay Stu, seminal moments in your life.
I think you wrapped them all up. I think the Magic Johnson retirement.
Oh, yeah, yes.
That was, and we'll talk about this in the podcast, that was the succession of events in Los Angeles, right? Like in LA, we had Magic retire, then we had
Rodney King.
The Rodney King video, right? Then the Rodney King verdict, which led to the riots, but I remember 1991, fall of 1991, the way it works in Southern California in public high schools is 6th period is your sport. And so 6th period in the fall, you go there and you do drills or work out or would just play. And Tom McCluskey was our head coach. I was just a freshman. And he called us all in. Everybody sat everybody down. And he said, boys, in like an hour, Magic Johnson's going to have a press conference. He has HIV, and HIV is the virus that leads to AIDS. He's going to die. And he went into like a speech about safe sex and whatever. And I would also tell you that, again, this is more athlete than mainstream of the moments as an athlete you remember. I remember that. I remember Mary Lou Retton and Edwin Moses at the 84 games. And then Len Bias dying as well. Because in my childhood, like the say no to drugs was Len Bias did cocaine, died. The safe sex was Magic Johnson had unprotected sex, and got HIV. Right. So those are the moments. And then the treatment of black people by police, it was the Watch the Rodney King video, which, like, again, if you hadn't, I'd never seen it. I never seen anything like this. So those are the moments you grew up on. Now, Sam, you're younger, and you grew up in the Midwest. Are any of these in the seminal moments of your life?
Yes, absolutely. Listen, the Bronco pursuit was like nowadays you're connected to your cell phone at the hip. You can text somebody, you can put something on Twitter. We have viral moments. Things spread so fast. In the era before cell phones, when OJ was on the run, I feel like someone called our house, like a relative or a friend, told my mom what was going on. We put the TV on to watch it. Something like that to spread across the country as fast as it did, and for everybody to tune in. That was like a moment we would see today with cell phones and internet, things going really fast, viral videos. That was the first like viral sort of television footage, and it happened in the early 90s. It was fascinating. But I remember watching a lot of the coverage. I remember Saturday Night Live parroting certain portions of the court and the trial. It was it was a lot fodder, endless fodder.
Norm Macdonald on Weekend Update week after week,
he
and
slayed.
The Dancing Itos on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno at that time too. Circus, yep.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Circus.
It's like the Dancing Itos or whatever, or Mike Myers playing Judge Ito, would never happen today because it wouldn't be culturally appropriate, right? They'd get slaughtered for that. Also, I would tell you this is the first time they put science on trial. And if you remember, that was when the first real public use of forensics. And it's so there's a 1 in 3 million chance this is not him. They're like, yeah, 1 in 3 million. Which to anyone who knows science knows it's him. To anyone else is like, well, wait, so you're saying it's like Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance. It was a time which now we've evolved to understanding that eyewitness testimony is the least likely testimony to give us factual, at least relevant testimony. But back then, it was, he says it, you can believe it. If the glove don't fit, you must acquit. Right? It was amazing theater. I was a freshman at Notre Dame, and we were in theology class, and they pulled down the projector and they played it live on CNN, and everybody was stunned, and there's a couple of people running around. The juice is loose. The juice is loose, right? Crazy. And I think here's the other thing it was. And Tiger Woods did not hurt anybody but his family. Okay? But his family and his own reputation. But it was the first time I can remember, and again, help me out if I'm someone who we had created this mythical figure. OJ Simpson from poverty in San Francisco goes to USC, wins the Heisman Trophy, goes to the NFL, rushes for 2,000 yards in 14 games, and becomes he made it. He crossed over. OJ Simpson, to me, a child of the 80s, was Hertz, was NBC and on television, and was this is what an athlete can do. You can make it out of nothing and become a movie star.
The Naked Gun movies,
He was in the Naked Gun movie. He was immensely likable. So you go from one of the most likable former NFL superstars to a double murderer. Right? And remember that, again, you start to remember the whole story, that he had left on a red-eye flight that night to Chicago, and then he came back, and then he was at her gravesite, which is in Orange County, very close to where I grew up. I remember my brother was on the freeway at the time, and everybody stopped on the freeway, and people were on the overpasses, cheering him on at the time. What a bizarro time in our world. Bizarro time.
And by the way, none of that slow speed chase was allowed in the trial, which is just one of the many things that happened during that trial that you just scratch your head. That slow speed chase was I think OJ telling the rest of the world that he did it.
Yes.
And it wasn't admissible in the court, that's why as we're watching the trial, we all knew he was guilty. We were just waiting for him to be called guilty. And then when he wasn't, it was such a shock to the system.
Right. And a lot of the celebration at the time was not about celebrating for OJ. It was about celebrating the police because of, frankly, what had happened with Rodney King.
In an unjust court system. It was like,
right.
People feeling for years and years like the court system was stacked against them because of their race.
When the truth is, it's about your money, not about race. Right? If you have the best lawyers, then you can win. If you don't, then you can't. And oh yeah, by the way, like again, it's we talk about the lawyers, and the forensic evidence was damning. It was damning. And yeah, they screwed it up with the glove thing. It's just a fascinating, fascinating thing to watch. Fascinating thing to watch. But I feel no sympathy. I don't mourn. I would encourage you as well to not mourn. It's always interested to see how people handle it. And I think a lot of people who are 35 and younger just don't understand. And that's okay. It's our job as people that were alive and that understood all the ramifications of it to fill you in on what it's actually about, what was actually going on. Right? It's honestly, it's the same way in sports. I feel like I'm the perfect age now in sports because, I've had people who are younger. I'll just point out, I have no negative energy towards Nick Wright. Okay, but Nick Wright would always talk about, well, Jordan's teams were swept in the playoffs, and he got swept in the playoffs by the Celtics in '86. Like, okay, dude, back then it was a 5-game series. He hadn't played the whole year. He was on had a terrible roster. He had 63 in one of the games, and that was arguably the greatest Celtics team of all time. So how about a little context that goes with it? Just a little bit of context that goes with it. Which, by the way, we've eliminated those discussions about being eliminated in the first round of the playoffs because it happened to LeBron, except, well, he was older and Anthony Davis got hurt. Like, okay, but like you're providing context, which is totally fair. I'm providing context for Jordan. The point is that if you were alive, the reason I don't argue with people about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, because the Kareem I know was older Kareem with the Lakers, and I can't argue about his dominance. I can only tell you what it looked like on film and what people tell me. I don't talk about Wilt Chamberlain. My only knowledge of Wilt Chamberlain is my dad, who was like, dude, he was a dog. He was uncoachable. He didn't have skill. He was just bigger and stronger and faster than everybody else, and when he faced Bill Russell, he couldn't compete with Bill Russell. Okay, that's my dad's perspective. I don't have a personal opinion, so I don't choose to share. But for whatever reason, now everyone feels like their opinion is valid about, I try not to talk and have opinion about things that I don't know or I didn't live through. I lived through this. You get people, well, why are you tweeting this stuff out? Like, you're going to take it down. No, I don't have to, because everybody knows I'm right. I don't feel sympathy for OJ Simpson. Sorry. Not something that I feel at all.